What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. As always, this video is brought to you by NutriBio Supplements, Crystals Bikinis, and Bio Longevity Labs. Check out the link in the description for all my codes for those sponsors. Today, I'm going to be going over a sample of what I think can help improve your leg training and your leg development. So this is a little bit of a different style video than what I usually do. I got a couple like specific requests by people of how to improve your legs. And so to me, when I think about improving a body part, it not only includes the execution, any cues that you might have, but also the programming and how things are set up. So I'm gonna share and talk through a sample split and how this can fit in with what you're doing. I'm going to show some examples training wise of some of the things that I do. I'm going to talk through some cues. And then I also got a couple of questions, or I'm going to answer a couple of the questions that I got specific to leg training or developing your legs. So, with that, I'm going to share my screen here and then we're going to get right into it. Okay. So hopefully you guys can see this. This is a sample for someone that wants to improve their legs. The leg training or the leg development is a priority. Let's say you have a good upper body. I'm going to talk through some different examples of how you might want to do this. So to me, training your legs twice a week should be a no-brainer. Now, I know that a lot of people may already do this and they set it up so that one day is all hamstrings and glutes, and then the other day is all quads and adductors. I like that. And I think it prevents you from doing the one gauntlet leg day that feels like so overwhelming or like you're not getting to everything. It will cover everything for the whole week doing it like that. However, it's kind of the bro split way of training your legs, meaning all of these individual body parts are still only going to get hit once a week. And so there's a lot of, I don't want to say wasted time, but time that you could maybe use more wisely to continuously progress your legs. So to me, I've found a lot of success and I've done it all. I've done the one leg day a week, and that grew the base for my legs quite a bit. I've done the split where it's all hamstrings and glutes on one day and then mostly quads on the other day, or all quads on the other day. And that seemed to help my legs. Now, in the past year plus or so, I've gone to more of this style. And being that I am, almost 15 years into training at this point, when something still drives noticeable progress on my physique, being as many years into training as I am, it stands out to me because obviously progress does not come easy at this point. It's not like a new person that's just being exposed to training and everything works when you first start. When you're 15 years in, you need to be very, very specific about how you expect to progress. So this is what I've landed on. And if you were to ask me right now, this is the best way to improve your legs and the way that makes most sense to me. So it's basically 2 full leg days, but because it's a reduced amount of volume per individual body part, it's not an overwhelming amount. So you're going to do a little bit of glutes and hams, you're going to do a little bit of calves, you're going to do a little bit of quads, adductors twice a week. And that is truly reaping the benefits of high frequency. For me, anytime I've really dramatically improved a body part on my own physique, it has come because of increased frequency. Of course, execution has to be good. Of course, training with intent and intensity has to be a priority. And your recovery has to be good. If you're hitting a body part, there's times I've done certain body parts 3 or 4 days a week. and you need to make sure that you're recovering, that you're in a good sleep schedule, that you're eating in a surplus. If you're enhanced, that you make sure that the PEDs are in place and consistently in place so that you can recover. With all that said, it does seem like frequency is a recurring theme anytime I make a big jump with one body part. So to me, then it makes sense. If I'm going to train legs twice a week, I'm going to train my entire leg twice a week. So this is a way that you could do it. The blue days are training days. The red days are rest days. So let's say you're doing this like 5-day standard split that fits within the 7-day week. You could do this where it's push pull legs. So you do push pull legs, and then maybe you do arms and legs depending on what your priority is. You could do push pull legs off, and then day 5 here is a total upper day. You could even do, there's times if your upper body is in a good place, you get good training with everything. It all has developed pretty evenly. You can almost do a little bit of like a bro split outside of the twice a week leg training, where let's say you do just chest and shoulders on Monday or day 1, you do just back on day 2, or back and rear delts, something like that. You have legs, you rest, and then you do arms here. So it's like for your upper body, it's just an individual day for each kind of body part or grouping, and then 2 leg days with 2 off days. However you want to break up those other days, I think is going to be very specific to what your physique requires. Now, you could also do it, and there's a great argument to be made for both. So I'm going to talk through it. You could put it so that each one of these leg days actually follows the rest day. So legs would be day 1 and legs would be day 5. That way you rest, let's say hypothetically on Sunday, you train legs Monday. You have 2 more training days, you rest, and then you hit legs again. So this would set you up to be super fresh, probably very excited to go to the gym and train coming off of a rest day. That's great. Especially at the early part of the week, though, the reason that I have this set up kind of in the opposite direction is that you are kind of putting off that day of recovery several days after. So if you go in Monday, and I did this for years, Monday was always like my standard leg day. If you smash legs on Monday, a lot of times, if you're really training hard, the couple days following, especially it seems 2 days following, you're going to be smoked with fatigue. Now, it's not like the physical fatigue of my legs are sore, so I can't bench press. That's not the case, but just overall systemic and mental fatigue. And you may just feel really beat up. So, hitting legs super hard as a priority, and then going and having to train and bring intensity to 2 more training days before you get to rest. To me, I've kind of landed on the rest day being the day after legs. I know I can get through these 2 upper body training days. Then I smash legs and I take a full day of rest. And because of that, I'm recovered. And this could be a bro way of thinking about it, but I really feel like I am getting the most from this day of training because I've rested the following day. So this is really, really going to be recovered, instead of delaying that recovery time. So that's why I have this set up. Now let's talk about it. I always would like to see, everyone could use more calves. And I think a good way of making sure that you don't blow them off because you're tired or whatever. A lot of people put them last, and then a lot of people end up just skipping them. I've been there personally, for sure. My solution for that is always putting them first. And what you will find a lot of times is when you get to your quad movements, especially something like a leg press or a squat variation, that because you've kind of loaded and fatigued, for lack of a better term, your calves, and really it's just that loaded stretch. A lot of times I feel like my ankle mobility is better than just going straight into something for quads. So, day one, let's say the first leg day, you're going to start with calves. And then this one, at least in terms of the order, is more glute and hamstring focused. And this is whether or not you want to bring your glutes and your hamstrings up just as a personal goal, or really this is done with the idea of being a competitor, and your glutes and hamstrings being a super important body part or area when you get on stage. Bigger glutes are more conditioned glutes. And I I personally proved that this past year. I put a lot of effort into specifically training my glutes, and it paid off. I've never looked more conditioned, especially in that area, and my glutes were in sooner than they've ever been. It was kind of always a rat race to the end. You know, when I have been at my best, I'm ready 7 days out or whatever. This week or this year at 5 weeks out, my glutes were dug out and ready to go. So a bigger glute, a bigger muscle is always a more striated and conditioned one. So I like the Smith hip thrust as like my main glute movement. A lot of gyms have the Nautilus glute drive, and I just personally, I know some people love it. I don't love it. I a lot of times struggle to feel my actual glutes. A lot of times I get off that machine from a working set and my lower back is super pumped. So I'm always going to stick with the Smith hip thrust. And because we're going like high frequency, like I'm going to be training all of these body parts again in a couple days, the volume doesn't need to be crazy. Now, I'm a big believer in higher reps than maybe other people or other body parts. I'm never really below 10 for most body parts. And I think the more work you can give your legs, the better. But I'm also of someone that I think it sounds contradictory, but I think the thing that has always worked for me with legs is high reps for as heavy a weight as I can do. So I'm trying to pair heavy weight with high reps. And then because of that, then the other piece of the whole equation is that the actual volume in terms of working sets is not that high. Like I'm using as much weight as I can, and I'm trying to like pretty brutally fail in a 10 to 15 rep range. So if you can do that and you can take those limited number of sets all the way, especially knowing that you're going to do it again in a couple of days, I'm not someone that has seen much of a return across the board with myself and clients from high volume, especially compared to my upper body or most people's upper body. Um, I have some theories as to why. I think there's just a lot of muscle fiber in the legs. It's half of our body. I think that when you really learn how to bring a set all the way for legs, there's no need to do a ton. Like, and I think at a certain point there's diminished returns in terms of your overall recovery. Like if you go in and hit 8 brutal sets of quads, your recovery is going to suck. I know if I do that, man, I'm going to be smoked for 10 days. And the idea of going in and doing that and maintaining that very high level of intensity for 8 sets just doesn't seem realistic on a week to week or every 3 day basis. So again, that's why the number of actual sets is low. You'll see most things are 10 to 15 or 10 to 20. Um, Smith hip thrust, and I'll show you guys an example of how I like to do that. So it's not an overly crazy extended range of motion. And a big thing that I think people get wrong here is that they extend their neck and spine up at the top. You want to keep a tucked chin and you want to keep a braced, like flex core. Like I'm really thinking about trying to keep my chin down, and I'm thinking about trying to keep my rib cage down to my pelvis. Um, One way that I've heard it described is that the glutes are an antagonist to our core. So if I'm flexing and bracing my core, I'm going to be able to contract my glutes against that, so to speak, and get really hard contractions. So it's a deliberate tempo as well. I think that's a big one. This number or this movement, a lot of times I see people that are loading this up and they don't have big legs or their glutes aren't growing. And it's like, maybe we should reconsider the loading that we're using here. Good morning. I think besides a hip thrust, I think this is probably the best or my personal favorite glute movement. And the reason for this order here is this is a movement that's going to get your glutes shortened and contracted. And that's where the majority of the load is. That's where it's difficult. I put that first because that's when I'm fresh and I'm ready to attack it. When I say good morning, I'm talking about using, I've heard different terms for this machine, but like a power squat or a V squat machine, ideally. Oh, sorry, that's the RDO. So this is what I'm talking about. I'm using a squat machine to do this like hinge good morning. And so again, the more that you bend at the knee, the more glute it's going to be. So I'm almost kind of half squatting, half hinging this to recruit as of much of my glute and stretch my glute as much as possible. So that's the reason for this pairing. So like the hip thrust gets the glute short, and then this is really going to stretch your glutes under load. And you'll notice for the most part, I'm really not locking it out either. I'm keeping it in kind of that lower 75% of the range of motion to keep the tension on the glutes throughout. Extensions. So this is one I see so many people do wrong. And I think, of course, your bread and butter movements are going to be like a leg press or a squat variation. But I think the leg extension is so underrated, undervalued, misused. It's one of the best things that we can do to build the quads. It's the only movement that gets the quads shortened, like knee locked out under load. Because if you think about it, if you do a lunge, if you do a squat variation, if you do a leg press and you lock your knees out at the top, there's no tension on the actual quads. So this is the best way, or really the only way to do that. And the notes that I often give people, or the cues that I often will give people when it comes to doing this, is you want a hard, aggressive squeeze at the top, where you get to the top aggressively, full force, you lock your knees out, and then you're squeezing hard. You're not just holding it there passively, you're aggressively squeezing. And this should be for like a 1 or a 2 count. And then it's a slow, deliberate, painful negative. It should be painful. You should be leaning into the pain. And then we get to the bottom and it's just right back up with as much explosive force as I can. I'm not hanging out much at the bottom because I'm going to get that stretch overload from leg press, from a squat, from a lunge. So I'm focused on just getting that squeeze and explosively driving up. And I'm going to go until that explosive effort to the top actually results in a slowed down or a completely stopped rep. That's failure. I'm not purposely going slow near the end of my set. I'm driving up with everything I have. But when I get to that point that everything I have means that I can only produce a very slow, almost stopped rep, that's when the set is over. That's where you need to take that. Now, if you hear all this and think, man, I'm using so much weight on the leg extension, I would never be able to do this. That's the whole point. Time and time again, I get videos from clients, I get videos from people on Instagram asking me to look at their training, and I see people in the gym consistently. The people that do the most amount of weight, that insist on loading up a very heavy extension, almost never have big legs. So I don't think about this movement in terms of progressive load. Every week, I'm not trying to go in and add 5 pounds to this. Every week, a lot of times, I'm just trying to make it more difficult. So I use other variables to make this difficult. Someone asked me about how to deal with knee pain. I think a lot of knee pain when it comes to training legs stems from, I don't want to say incorrectly, but just improperly loading the extension. Um, Keep in mind, this is a single joint exercise, so it does not require tons and tons of weight. When I talk about different aspects of progressive stimulus, it could be that I get to the top and squeeze for 3 seconds instead of, because I did a 2 second squeeze last week. Now I'm going to try and match the same reps, but I squeezed every single one of them for 3 seconds. I'll put a band around it to make it more difficult up at the top. And then simply, I just add more reps. I will do very high reps. I've done sets of 50 with that type of tempo that I described. And I have a lot of progress still to go with my physique. I'm not an Olympia winner. I'm not a pro bodybuilder. But my quads and the detail in my quads is probably the best aspect of my physique. And I can truly chalk up a lot of the detail that people notice or comment on in my quads from doing extensions like this. I've moved some big weights, on a squat or a leg press. It comes from doing a full range of motion and burying it to the floor, yes, but a big thing in terms of detail, and this sounds bro, I get it. You know what? If this is too bro for you, then you can ignore it and keep doing what you're doing. But people comment on the striations or the feathering that I get in my outer sweeps, or how striated my teardrop is, and that you don't see that often. I get these comments all the time when I'm in shape, and I can promise you it's because of the way that I've always done extensions. So let me see if I have an example. So you see aggressive squeeze at the top and then slow negative. I'm trying to make the negative painful. I'm trying to make every rep as difficult as possible internally without needing to rely on external load. You guys don't see it here, but I probably only have a 25 or two 25s on here. I have a band on here, and I have this kind of Husla pad, which adds to the stretch. But the thing that I want you to take away from this is the tempo. Again, aggressive squeeze, hard. I'm driving it hard on the way up. And then slow and deliberate and painful on the way down. And this is long. These sets are long. Again, I said I do high reps. Each rep takes quite a bit of time. So these end up being long sets. This is what I'm talking about. Trying to drive it up with full force. Everything that I got to try and get it all the way up to lockout. And then it just doesn't go anymore. So, with all that said, I have always favored extensions before my leg press or squat variations. I always felt like I got a lot more out of those bigger movements after my quad. My quads are super pumped at that point. They're full of blood, they're pumped. My knees are warmed up. And, I got to a point early on in my day where I was able to squat with some pretty heavy weight. And I just felt like, man, like, where do I go from here? If I'm doing 4 or 5 plates on a barbell squat, like, when does the risk outweigh the reward? I got to find another way to make this more difficult. And so I've just intuitively kind of switched it around, and I've always done these before. I think it's a great way to remind yourself that you're a bodybuilder, and that the idea is to not just move raw poundage, but to tax and stimulate the muscle. Um, so then, on this particular leg day, I'm going to do extensions, one set that looks just like that, and then 2 sets on a leg press. That's probably this. So in my gym, we have the Cybex squat press as one of the options. I think it's, one of the best pieces of equipment ever made. I also, you'll notice I wear a heel elevated squat shoe, and that's to kind of make up for or improve my lack of ankle mobility, thus getting me into greater knee flexion, which is just the ability to bend my knee. And this should be what your leg press looks like. So you see the bottom of my calf is literally to the insertion of my glutes and hamstrings. Like my calf is smashed into my hamstrings here. I could draw a line if I were to follow the bone of my calf and then my femur. It's a very tight, narrow little angle. So if you guys are putting so much weight on a leg press and you come down and your knee only makes a 90-degree angle, like let me pause it at another point. Like if you only come to here and then you're driving back up, you're missing the plot. You got to reduce the weight and you got to bury it. You got to leave the ego at the door and bury your ass to your heels. And that's how you'll grow big legs. The thing is, like people will say, oh, I'm going to have to reduce the weight by a ton. Initially, yes, you're going to have to reduce the weight. So reduce the weight by half, by 70%. Standardize that this is now your form and then build it up from there. When you get back to that weight that you were doing half reps with, but you're doing it with this type of form, your legs have no choice but to be bigger at that point. Now you'll notice here, similar to what I talked about on the good morning, I am not someone that's going to lock out a leg press or a squat variation. I'm going to get right to the point where I feel like tension is about to stop, and then I just immediately begin to descend again. I'm trying to stay in the fire. I've heard it described as piston reps. I like to describe it as staying in the fire. I'm leaning into the painful part of it. So there's no break. And when you get to a point where you can do some heavy weights with this type of form, you're going to have big legs. There's no doubt about it. And then, so for this day, I would finish adductor and abduction machine. I don't have much for cues. I would just, again, especially on the adductor machine where we're training the inner part of our thighs, I would just encourage a full range of motion. Don't load it up and do little half reps. Like really sit back in the machine, let your hips and knees flower open, and start with a light load if you need to, and then progress it and build your way up. So then at that point, we're going to take a rest, full rest day. We're going to come back, train something upper body, and then we're going to have legs again. Calves first, same idea. Now, this day, just because of the order, is going to be more of like a quad adductor focus. So we're going to do adductors first. I've always liked at least one day of doing this because when I get to like a leg press or a squat, it does feel like my everything is opened up a little bit more. My hips are a little bit more opened up. We'll do extensions here. And, when you're doing the same movement a couple times a week, I would encourage some type of variation. So, whether it's with different loads and rep ranges, some of you guys might have the prime or strive pieces of equipment in your gym. And because of that, then to create a different stimulus, the two different times you're going to use the same machine, you can mess around with that loading pattern and load it in different ways. Like I talked about, you can add a band one day and then not the other day. You can add 5-second squeezes at the top versus the other day you do a 1-second squeeze at the top. But I wouldn't just go in and do the exact same thing twice over. I would make sure that there's some change in the stimulus and that you're leaving room to progress one or some of these variables. Um, Squat variation, pretty basic stuff, whatever you like, whether it's a pendulum, a hack squat, even if I would encourage you to film and make sure that if you are using a barbell that it fits you, that you have some type of heel elevated, or your ankle mobility is really good and allows you to stay with an upright posture to emphasize the quads. Did I film one here? Let me see. Okay, so here's an example. So hack squat, again, I'm just burying it. Think about that or that angle at the knee, and I'm only going about three-fourths of the way up. I'm getting the bread and butter, the full stretch, full range of motion at the bottom, but I'm not locking it out and giving it a rest. You'll see I'll even pause in the stretch here, and it's just constant tension throughout. I'm staying within the fire. On this, because I go a little bit wider on that leg press that I did earlier in the week, and wearing the squat elevated shoes, it allows me to go a little bit closer stance and it still feels natural and really quad dominant. So you have those. So you have that the calves and then the adductor extension squat variation all in a row. I like a pit shark RDL. I did a barbell RDL at this point, or in this space for a long time. And I think it just smashed my recovery and I didn't get tons of glute or hamstring development out of it. It did improve the erectors of my lower back some. Um, but I think as bodybuilders or someone trying to specifically develop areas of a physique, there are better variations. And so this is what I've landed on. If you have like a pit shark, um, or like a cable squat or whatever you want to call it, I like this movement a ton. And I like I like that this is a pretty diverse or flexible movement. So you could absolutely bend at the knee more here and make it more about your glutes. You could go with a little bit more of like a soft but locked out knee, a little bit more of an upright knee, and then it would make it more hamstrings. And with this, I have just standardized that I do a full lockout because I'm under tension the entire time. So I will lock this out and squeeze my glutes really hard. And then I finish, this example, I would finish with a lying hamstring curl. Someone might ask, why not a seated hamstring curl? And, that is probably my favorite hamstring curl variation, but also, maybe overthinking it, maybe not, but I've already just kind of worked my hamstrings in the stretched position more so with this RDL, and the seated hamstring curl is predominantly stretched or lengthened. So then I'm going to go and do something different here. And then hamstrings, I will say, like a hamstring curl or anything that I feel safe doing hamstring wise. I have seen some research that it seems like the hamstrings are more fast twitch muscle fibers, meaning that they would respond better to heavier weights and lower reps. So that's why I have kind of a lower rep range notated here. So those are the best cues, execution examples, and programming tips that I could give you guys to improve your legs. Let me pull up these questions and see if I can answer a couple of these. Okay, this person asks more reps, less sets, or more sets, less reps with legs, or more of both. I don't think I use enough volume since I'm on my legs all day. In theory, they need more volume. That could be one part of training. I think that is under discussed is just trying something different or doing something that you're not already doing. If you're unhappy with the development or the results, if you have always trained legs in a lower rep range, or let's say with lower volume, and you're not happy with your leg development or your legs are obviously behind, try more volume. I don't think there's necessarily a set way. I think that needs to be at the forefront. Like, what has worked for you? If you've always done this and it hasn't worked great, try something else. But like I talked about earlier in the video, I am more so a fan of lower set totals and putting more into those actual sets, meaning the intensity is right up to or even beyond failure in some cases. And those things are happening in higher rep ranges. I'm really not doing a set of squats, um, with the target of doing 6 reps near failure. I'm probably going to aim for 15. And if I can get 16 or 17 with a spot, I think that's way more beneficial for legs. Um, if you were doing a combined arm leg day, would you do arms before or after? I think it totally depends on your physique. I think, like for a while, I was really desperate to bring my arms up, and my legs have always been a strong point. So I would go in and do 4 or 5 sets of curls, bicep curls, before I did legs. And that was fine. I was totally like unaffected, both mentally and physically. Um, Now, on the flip side, if you really need to bring up your legs and you've decided you're also going to do arms on leg day, all of your leg training better be before your legs. And I'm not really even a huge fan of this for people that really need to bring their legs up. I think that this is only a decent idea if your legs are awesome and you really need to bring up your arms like desperately. Outside of that, I don't think that this is great programming. When pushing legs really hard, my knee health starts to degrade. What can be done to mitigate this? I think that immediate post workout stretching and stretching in general, in terms of doing like bent over, touch your toes, like hanging hinged hamstring stretches, whether that's nightly before bed. And like I talked about, I think immediately post workout after leg training specifically. Um, a lot of us, I think, just have super tight hamstrings and never stretch them out. And then a lot of times I think that causes a tight hamstring can cause like a shortened patella at the front of the kneecap. So I'm a fan of those. I've seen people do different things where they work um, backwards with like a sled. I think that can help, or even at a slow pace on something like a treadmill. But I think this also, a lot of our dysfunctions or pains come from habits. And so if you are habitually overloading a leg extension and just doing tons and tons of weight in the name of doing shitty form, or if you way overload your squat and leg press variations and you do half reps, your knees are going to have issues because you're using more weight than the joint is able to go through a full range of motion on its own with. So, the super full ranges of motion with appropriate loads actually lead, in my experience, to healthier joints. I'm going to wrap it up here. I think this has gotten a little bit long. I can be a little bit long winded, as you guys know, and I'm super passionate about leg training specifically. So I'm going to wrap that up. Thanks to everybody that's followed along. Let me know in the comments. Is this something that you guys like? Is this a format that you guys want to continue? I can touch on different body parts. I can talk programming. Let me know. I'm trying something new. So keep me posted. Let me know in the comments if you guys like this, if you want to see more of this. As always, thanks to everybody that has followed along. And until next time, I'm out.